Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Carolyn White, and I'm currently the president of the Park Rapids League of Women Voters. And I want to welcome you to the program tonight. A couple of housekeeping rules. If you've got cell phones, you probably want to turn those off.
Yes.
For those of you that aren't familiar with this room, if you need a bathroom, they are like right out that corner, but so go out that door and up the hallway. You can also get there that direction, but it's too long. And then I'll have to turn my cell phone off here. I keep it out in case somebody gets lost or something and they need me. Okay, and I did start the video camera going, and so just remember that that has a pretty good microphone on it. So if you're sitting that side near the camera and you have a comment or whispering, you may be on the video.
Live mics.
Which is fine with me.
No cussing.
You may want to.
Yeah.
And a reminder, League of Women Voters is an all-volunteer organization that is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any government level. But we are always working on vital issues that are concerns to our members and the public. And now I'm going to introduce Beth Baker-Canoodla, who is going to tell you about what happened on January 4th, 2000, 25 years ago, which is why we had the cake and we're celebrating.
Hello.
You gotta put it right up there.
I don't.
Yell at us.
Yeah. Okay.
Teacher voice.
This evening's event is also celebrating League of Women Voters. Does it work?
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Park Rapids area for 25 years of service to the Hubbard County area. On January 4th, 2000, 22 people gathered at the library to elect a chair and advisor to the chair for the newly reestablished League of Women Voters. Park Rapids had an active League of Women Voters during the 1930s, but faded in the 50s and 60s. Today, we honor the following people who participated in the January 2000 meeting. And I was lucky enough to know a lot of these ladies, both some that are here and some that are not. Please stand when your name is read. Pam Herron, Florence Hedin, Luann Ferdloff, is not able to be here this evening. Sue Cutler also was not able to be here this evening. Brita Saylor, Nancy Carroll, Irene Weiss, Jan Friedel, and Jean Grimes, both who are deceased. Sharon Rizak Anderson, who I believe lives in Arizona. Iva Theotis, and I don't know about Iva. Chris Broker, Jane Reich, Connie Converse, Joanne Ailing, also deceased. Carol Nelson, Esther Fieldman, deceased. Helen O'Dare, Nancy Tague, Karen Kolk, and Al Undum, and all of the last four also deceased. So I remember many of these people as being wonderful, active, energetic, fantastic. Yeah. So thank you all for your foresight, energy, and your service to this community. We appreciate it.
Okay, terrific. Today we are presenting a program called Media Literacy in the Modern World. Our speakers are Sabrina Halverson and Shannon Geeson. Sabrina Halverson is an award-winning broadcaster with over 30 years in the media. She's currently the CEO of North Dakota News Cooperative. She began in Central California and has spanned radio, TV, and print with a strong focus on agriculture and rural issues over the past decade. She later moved to North Dakota. I'm not quite sure why.
There was a man involved.
No. Enough said. Because the weather didn't. Where in about 2018 and onward, she worked as a broadcaster with the American Ag Network and later a national correspondent with AgNet Media. Sabrina's presentation will explore the importance of being a savvy news consumer, offering practical strategies for spotting misinformation, recognizing bias, and finding reliable sources. Shannon is our current Park Rapids Enterprise editor. She earned a bachelor's degree in mass communications from Bemidji State and started as a journalist in Sabika Managa Review Messenger and was hired later at the Park Rapids Enterprise. She has worked for more than 20 years and for the last 7.5 been the editor. She will share how she and her staff cover Hubbard County area in a time when many small towns are losing their newspapers. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to have Sabrina present her remarks, and she says it's a short summary of things. Then Shannon's going to give us another short summary of what's going on locally. Then we're going to open it up for questions and things like that, so we can get a discussion going. So I will turn it over to Sabrina. And one thing, there are handouts on the table as you came in. Sabrina had some, and the League of Women Voters all on misinformation and how to spot things and stuff. So please take one on your way out.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, I have a loud voice and I'm a broadcaster for many years, so first off, if you can't hear me, raise your hand or yell or something and I will get louder. It's very possible for me to get louder. So first off, I want to thank you guys for being here, for coming out this evening, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters here for having us and for doing this. I think it's a very important topic. She mentioned that I have a short is relative. Bear with me. I'm trying to save plenty of time because what I would like to do is at the end, I would like for us to be able to have conversations. I think this is worthy of having a good conversation, and so if you guys have questions, I want to be able to talk about them. I am with the North Dakota News Cooperative, which is a nonprofit and nonpartisan news organization that works to bring reliable, fact-based reporting to communities around North Dakota, especially rural areas that often don't get a lot of the coverage that they deserve. I think you guys are familiar with issues in rural areas. So we have a two-part mission, though. That's the first part. The second part is media literacy, which is what we're doing here today. So a quick bit about me. She already told you a bit, but I have been in media for more than 30 years. I started really young, really young. At my dad's newspaper. My dad owned a newspaper in rural California. And I started out working there and then moved up into the bigger city. I worked at a bigger newspaper for a while and then moved to an even bigger city and worked in radio and television while also writing for newspapers. I also wrote for magazines as well. So I have covered everything from high-profile murder cases to the impeachment of presidents to us, bombing, going to wars. So about 13 years ago, I shifted gears and changed from general news into agriculture. And I got to work in primarily agricultural policy and international trade. I had the honor of being invited to the White House a few times. In fact, in 2023, I was invited to the White House Christmas party. I thought it was a joke, and so I declined. Turned out it was not a joke, but that's the way to never be on that list again. So, but last year I was also invited. I was one of only 6 reporters from around the nation to take part in a discussion on rural matters at the White House, and that was a real honor to do. Also in November, I was named the Farm Broadcaster of the Year, which is the highest honor in that industry. And throughout the years, I've been honored to receive some other awards. But that is not what's important. What's really important to me is what we're talking about today, and that is helping people to understand the news. helping people to understand what we do as journalists and to distinguish between those of us who are journalists and people or companies that use news as entertainment or to manipulate information for their own goals. So let's start with a quick show of hands. How many of you have ever felt overwhelmed by the amount of news and information coming at us every day? Yeah. Yeah, me too. My hand is up there. In fact, it honestly keeps me awake at night. That's part of my job, but still, it keeps me awake at night. I'm sure you, yes. So it is constant, isn't it? We get news alerts on our phone. We have social media. We have forwarded emails. I get a lot of messages. So sometimes it really feels impossible to keep up, let alone to figure out what is true. So that's why we're here today. We want to talk about how we can all become a little bit more confident, more informed, and more careful consumers of news and information. So media literacy, we hear about it sometimes in schools. It's extremely important in schools. I will say support any media literacy programs in your schools. But it's not just for students, it's for all of us, especially in this fast-paced world. So what do I mean by media literacy? At its core, media literacy is simply the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and even create media in different forms. But in today's world, it is also about protecting ourselves from misinformation, and in doing so, protecting our democracy. We are flooded with information from traditional news sources, from blogs, from social media, from viral videos, you name it. Unfortunately, mixed in with a lot of the credible information, there's a lot of misinformation and even deliberate disinformation, which is false information that is meant to deceive. And there's a distinction there between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation can simply be somebody is wrong. That information is not correct. Disinformation, they intend to be wrong. They are wrong on purpose to sway you to whatever they want you to believe. The consequences are the same. When we can't tell fact from fiction, it's harder for us all to make good decisions. As voters, as parents, as community members, we need trustworthy information to stay engaged and informed. So another quick question for you. This one stings a little. How many of you verify a news story before you share it? Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. That's exactly what media literacy helps us to do. It helps us to slow down, check the facts, and understand where the information is coming from. And I would add to that, it helps us understand why we're getting that information. What is the agenda behind it? So we're going to get a little bit interactive with spotting some misinformation. And I want to use the example of the LA immigration protest that happened earlier this month. Is everybody kind of aware of the, okay, it was hard to not be aware of it, right? It was constantly in our faces. So depending on what news sources you saw, it was either a violent protest with cars burning in the street, the entire city on lockdown, people getting shot, on every corner, or it was a peaceful dance party with California hippies with flowers in their hair blowing bubbles in the streets, right? All taking place in a very tiny section of town. But the reality is, it was a mixture of those two scenes. The protest took place in a very small part of the city. I'm actually very familiar, I used to be on the air in LA, so I'm very familiar with LA. It's a very large city. The area where this protest happened was a very small part of the city. I was trying to judge as I was driving in. This is my first time in Park Rapids, and I have to say it's gorgeous, by the way. But I was trying to judge as I was driving in so I could give a comparison. And I would have to say it's almost like the protest took place in a corner of this parking lot, just a corner, compared to the rest of the whole town. So that's kind of a relative example. There was very little violence in the protests. I got daily alerts from the LA Police Department because I signed up for them, as I can do as media. We actually all can, but I was so confused by all the different reports I was seeing from different news agencies. I started just getting the reports myself. There was very little violence. there was actually more violence by the police than the protesters. Not to say that it was misused or shouldn't have happened. That's not my decision to make. But in the grand scheme of things, there was not much violence for the protest. In fact, there was less violence than when the Dodgers won the World Series. I'm also a Dodgers fan. I'm sorry. I tried to let that one go, but I couldn't. But when you think about those protests, we saw the videos, we saw the pictures, right? We saw everything burning. We saw the town on fire. We saw people being dragged off. The problem is, a lot of those photos and videos, especially what was being shared on social media, were from other situations. They were from protests that happened years ago and at different locations. So following this news story was exhausting for me because of the constant misinformation, because I was constantly having to use media literacy skills to determine what was fact and what was being used to play into somebody's agenda. Some agendas are less harmful than others, but as someone myself who treasures accuracy and truth, I personally think it's bad that any time that someone uses misinformation and disinformation to manipulate us. Whether that is using over and over again a photo of a single burning car at a protest to get more clicks, which happened a lot. The one burning car was used over and over again. It gives the impression that there were many burning cars. Or using violent videos of the 2020 protests, perhaps in Minneapolis, perhaps in other cities, Portland, saying it was LA in June. I saw that happen as well. I covered the protests in 2020, and some of the videos I recognized very easily that is, well, and also, that's not LA. That is clearly, Portland. Both of those are manipulation. Whether it was just for the clicks or for political reasons, it's still manipulating us as news consumers. And then we have the problem of AI. Artificial intelligence has become very good at making photos and videos that look very real. I get fooled, and I am trained to not be fooled. I get fooled by AI videos. My daughter, and you know how our kids love to call us out on things, my daughter has called me out more than once on an AI video that I was fooled by. So I'm learning, like everybody else, I am learning. And sometimes people create these videos and photos to promote disinformation in a very believable way. So keep in mind that emotional photo that you see on Facebook of the baby and the puppy being rescued during a hurricane. That was fresh on my mind because I just saw a news program where they were talking about it and that it was fake. It's likely not real. Unfortunately, we are in a time right now where we really have to question everything. It's not just a case of, in the past we've had to question news coverage because reporters can be wrong. Now we are questioning everything because people are purposely feeding us disinformation for whatever purpose. So how do we know the difference? Well, again, now more than ever before in history, we have to be very vigilant. So we're going to put this into practice. I'm going to read you a few headlines, and I want you to tell me if they sound credible or not. Headline number 1. Scientists say chocolate cures COVID.
We wish.
We wish, right, exactly. That was my response. I wish. Man, I would never have COVID. All right, headline number 2. Local school board approves new lunch menu. Headline number 3. Viral video claims election ballots were found in a dumpster. All right, so let's break those down a little bit. The first one, as much as we want it to be, it's probably too good to be true. One rule of thumb I have is, especially with health claims, I am always very cautious with health claims, especially sensational ones. A lot of times, they eventually will lead to somebody trying to sell a product. And so they are manipulating information to sell you that product. Again, it comes to agenda. The second headline, local school board approves new lunch menu. It's local news, it's basic information, That is most likely to be legitimate. It's also very easy to verify. You can go look at the new lunch menu. You can also see the school board minutes. Also, as Shannon and I have discussed, I have strong faith in local newspapers. They are among the most trustworthy news source you will ever find, is your local newspaper. The third headline, viral video claims election ballots were found in a dumpster. It's emotional. It's designed to spark outrage. With something like that, when you read a headline, you immediately have an emotional reaction to it. Take a breath, and then ask to see this whole story. Look for reliable reporting and be very careful with viral claims. Those are often, the bigger they make it sound, there's a reason. Again, it goes back to what their agenda is. The good news is that there are some simple ways to check for credibility, or to check the credibility. One trick that I personally use, and I will be interested if Shannon disagrees with me on this, but one thing I do is I look for adverbs and adjectives. For me, it's the easiest way, and it's the start of how I can see where somebody's coming from. So we remember from our English classes years ago that adverbs and adjectives are the descriptor words, right? Their opinion. I personally love rainy days. So it's raining. I would go outside and say it's beautiful today. Beautiful is an adjective. It's my opinion. It's not fact. There are a lot of people who don't like the rain. They would not agree that it's beautiful. So as a reporter, I would go outside and say, it's raining today. And then let you make up your mind if it's beautiful or not. In a news story, the descriptor words should be in quotation marks and credited to whoever is interviewed. You know, it's beautiful today, said Carol. That's how a news story is written. There may be opinions in it, sure, but it's not the opinion of the writer. It's credited to a source, and that's valuable. That gives us the opportunity to see whose opinion that is and to determine for ourselves if we agree with it or not. It's not presented as just a fact. An opinion piece is just what it sounds like. It gives the opinion of the writer. No quotes needed. We know that it's an opinion piece. We're pretty familiar with those. It's like the editorials in your newspaper, and there's a place for those. We do need to sometimes hear the opinions, especially thoughtful, educated opinions from the people, other people in our community or from others. But they are presented and clearly labeled as being opinion pieces. They're not trying to pass them off as being a fact-based article. The biggest gray area that I find is what I call news entertainment, such as cable news channels, radio talk shows, and so much of what we find on the internet. It can be hard to distinguish between what is credible news, what is someone's rant, and what is deliberate disinformation. So that's where we really have to start asking some questions. So I went to Cornell University's library and online and got some suggestions from them on what to ask. The first thing they say is to ask, who's behind the information? And that's something that as reporters, we always, when we're actual reporters, we check. Who are these sources? Are they reliable? Are they experts? Do they know what they're talking about? What's their agenda? What is the evidence is the next question. Especially with those health claims that we were talking about. Health claims, they should be published in reputable studies in reputable publications. Again, that's the evidence. So what is the evidence in this story? Are other reliable outlets reporting the same thing? If you find one random news story with this big claim and nobody else is reporting that same big claim, likely it's made up. Sometimes, though, you'll find a few different news outlets reporting one big claim, and it still isn't factual. That's where you look again at who's reporting it, what is their agenda. That's often political. I would say that happens mostly in political situations. Mostly might be the wrong word to use there, but I see it a lot in political situations because they're trying to lean their audience a certain direction. And if there's one political story being told in one manner, then they're all going to have that same lean. It doesn't necessarily mean they're true. That requires a lot of investigation on our part as news consumers. It used to not be our job as news consumers to have to do that. It used to be the reporter's job to do the research, to make sure the stories are accurate, to make sure the stories are not biased. However, we have such a loud delegation of biased news that now it is the consumer's job to do that. And again, I will say, this is Sabrina's theory. This is not proven fact, but this is Sabrina's theory. The bigger, more national you get with the news, that's where you're going to find the more bias. Because we're talking again about the cable news networks, the radio talk shows, they have bias. You know, all of the cable stations lean one way or the other. They all allegedly have programming that is supposed to be just straight news with no opinion in it. But even watching those, I hear a lot of opinion. So, you know, we obviously know like Fox News is more right-leaning, CNN is more left-leaning. When we watch those and understand that they have bias, we can still get some news from there, but we need to understand we're getting the news with bias. And that's what we can do as news consumers. I find it personally unfortunate that that's our job now, but it's kind of the state of things. It's also why I'm not on cable TV, because I don't want to be that type of reporter. Finally, can you fact check it through a trusted source? So again, if there's a news story that you're questioning, do a Google search and find somebody that you trust with information that you trust. Important that you're not just getting somebody to back up something that you really want to be true. There's a lot of things that we want to be true that's simply not. I go back to the chocolate and COVID. I would love for that to be true. I would love to find sources that say, yes, that's true, and I would never have COVID, like I said. I know that it's not, though. So I'll ask this. How many of you have ever been fooled by a fake news story?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have. Absolutely, I have. And it's embarrassing to me when I am. Fortunately, I usually catch it before I share anything, just because, again, that's my job. But there have been times when I'm telling something to my husband, and he looks at me, my husband's also a news person, which makes things really difficult sometimes. And he'll look at me and say, did you fact check that one? I say, oh, shoot. So, it happens. It happens to everyone. But with practice, we can get better at spotting the red flags. So luckily, we're not alone in this. There are some really good tools and resources out there. Trusting News is one that I use a lot. It's really more for people on my end of this, for the reporters, the journalists. I've been through several of their programs. Trusting News does training programs for journalists to teach us how to be better at our jobs, really, how to find more accurate and reliable information, how to present that in a way that is easier for our audience to understand, and how to be more transparent to our audience, which I personally think is very important. I have a website that's just mine, sabrinahalverson.com, and I've had it for a few years, and the reason I started it, well, I started it for a lot of reasons, but on there I have a frequently asked questions page, and I talk about transparency, and I also have on there like my rules of ethics, and I also have an AI policy on there, so that wherever I'm reporting, because I do a lot of freelancing and I'm out on the internet in all kinds of places, I want people to know that I'm always trying to follow these ethics, these journalistic ethics. My ethics are kind of old school in journalism. I'm old school. And then also that I am not using AI in my reporting. It's important for me that people can know that. So Trusting News is one of the places that I went to learn those things. As a news consumer, what I will do is look for other people who have been through their programs, because most of newspapers and news organizations that have been through their programs will usually have it listed somewhere on their website. So if I'm questioning, is this a good source? Can I trust these people? I will look to see other organizations that they've partnered with. Trusting News is one of them. Pointer Institute. They, for consumers, news consumers, they have some very good fact-checking and media literacy resources. And then Cornell Library, which I just referenced also, has some very good resources, so that when you're on your own, if you wanted to look some of these things up, you can go to these websites, and I put them on the handout that I have back there. Some of the links are kind of long, but you can type them out. You can also Google them and see. And then the News Literacy Project. Yes, I am a huge supporter of this. They offer free tools to help individuals like us separate fact from fiction. They also have programs that go into schools so that the young people who are coming up don't have to catch up like we all do. So I'm a firm believer in this. So we have the handout. I encourage you guys to take one. It has some tips on there as well, along with those links. So essentially, I just want everybody to remember that we all have a role to play in slowing the spread of misinformation. Even small steps like pausing before sharing, checking your sources, questioning sensational headlines, those can all make a big difference. And I think that I think it's really important to point out that sometimes it's just bad or sloppy reporting. Even in solid, credible news organizations, deadlines come fast. Reporters are often overworked and tired. Trust me, we are tired, and we are human. So even those of us who are really honestly trying to present accurate information that's easily understood and presents the facts, we mess up. Sometimes we just mess up. So for those of us who are with legitimate news agencies, who are trying to do the right thing, I always suggest if you, as a news consumer, if you find an error or something that needs correcting, first talk to the reporter. Send him an email or give him a phone call and say, and be nice about it, because again, we're tired. Hey, I saw this in your article, I needed to let you know that this was incorrect. The reporter can then make a correction. It hurts us, we struggle because we don't want to be incorrect, but we do it. If we're incorrect, we want to fix it. If the reporter does nothing, then I say take it up the next level to the editor. If it's something that needs to be corrected, take it to the editor. And then if the news organization still doesn't do anything and you're absolutely certain that it's incorrect and it's something important, then you can do as you wish publicly and bring it to people's attention. But start with the reporter, because again, most of us don't do it on purpose. We're humans, and humans make mistakes. And we do a lot of work every day, and that makes mistakes happen. Before I wrap up, I just want to leave you with this, that media literacy is not about being cynical or distrusting everything. It is about curiosity, critical thinking, and protecting ourselves and our communities from being misled. Because an informed citizen is a powerful citizen. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and I want you to just think about this. What's one thing that you'll do differently the next time you see a questionable headline or news story? All right, and we'll talk about that after. Thank you for letting me yap at you guys for a little while.
Let's see if I'm still on here. Everybody see a green light on?
It turned on, I could hear it.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's so far up there. Yeah, I was working before it, so we'll see it. Ah, there we go. It's like watch your presentation.
There you go.
Okay.
Yes. All right, right about here?
Yeah.
Well, first, I wanted to give a little introduction on the enterprise, because not everybody knows our history. And we don't always do a really good job of promoting ourselves, so this is a great opportunity for that. We were actually founded in 1882. Wow. The Park Rapids Enterprise is Hubbard County's oldest continuous business. For a historical perspective, the first edition of the Enterprise was published on July 25th, 1882, 9 years before the railroad arrived, and 1 year before Park Rapids was designated as the county seat. The Enterprise was the first newspaper north of the Northern Pacific Railroad in Minnesota. We recently, as Cece mentioned, digitized our archives. So nearly 200,000 pages of the Enterprise are available through newspapers.com going back 43 years, sorry, 143. So, of course, the Enterprise is committed to providing the most complete local news in the region. We're part of the Forum Communications Company, which is a family-owned company headquartered in Fargo. They own about 20 plus newspapers across Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and Wisconsin. And some of this I'm skipping over, their reach and so forth. But we're part of what's called the Northern Lakes Group, part of Bemidji, Black Duck, Detroit Lakes, that little group right there. And we specifically, we cover about a 50-mile radius from Park Rapids, so it's not just Park Rapids. That's why I sometimes prefer to just call it the Enterprise, because we also cover Nevis, Akeley, Dorset, Monaga, Lake George, LaPorte, Osage, and the surrounding lakes areas. We are an award-winning newspaper that publishes Wednesdays and Saturdays each week, along with continuous website and social media updates. We found out, this is overall the reach of our newspapers in Minnesota. Let's skip over some of this. And the typical reader, which it's interesting stuff, but for another time. So the Park Rapids Enterprise, we currently have 3,907 subscribers. And I actually didn't realize this. We distribute 33,210 newspapers each month. That's mail and newsstand. And then to count print impressions, we doubled that. It's times 2.3. So that's how you get the 76,382 print impressions. We also have an e-newspaper, and about 800 some people read that. And then on average, we have 62,200 people visiting our website every month. The interesting thing, we also recently found out that our subscription numbers are on par with our sister newspapers in much larger cities, like Detroit Lakes, Bemidji, Worthington, and Dickinson, North Dakota. So we're pretty proud about that. And we recently learned that we have a 50% subscription saturation rate, which is among the highest within Forum Communications Company. So we're pretty proud about that too. That means 50% of the Park Rapids community subscribes to the paper in some form, print, digital, or both. So, of course, I need to say thank you, because we so appreciate the readers and the subscribers who are supporting us. We live and work here, we raise our families here, you're our neighbors, you're our friends, but we're super grateful that you support the local newspaper. And the newspaper will thrive if we retain our subscribers and advertisers. We need both to stay in business. And, of course, we believe that democracy demands an informed citizenry, if you can say the word. It's our civic duty as Americans to be informed voters. So some of the challenges that I see here at the Enterprise or in the community, people are willing to subscribe to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, but there's resistance to subscribing to the local newspaper because news is supposed to be free. But newspapers are a business like any other, with salaries, utilities, equipment, and other expenses to gather and produce the news. So we can't give away our product for free. As Sabrina mentioned, there definitely is information overload, and I'm seeing news aversion where people just want to tune out. There are claims of political bias. We've heard it at the Enterprise that we've been charged with being too liberal or too conservative. Mostly it's thrown at national news, but because we at the Enterprise, we really don't have a political agenda. We don't have any interest in getting into the left or the right or what's happening on the national stage either. We are hyper local. We write about business. We write about local government. We write about our sports teams. None of that's really political. We love doing those human interest stories about your friends and your neighbors and people doing really interesting things in our community. Most of the complaints we receive are about the opinion page. That's opinion, that's not news, that's opinion. And so that's why I was really happy that we have this media literacy program, and I hope more to come, because it's clear that there's some trouble with making that distinction. We have people who get upset about the letters to the editor. Well, I didn't write it, it was submitted, Some people are upset about the cartoon on the opinion page. I do want to point out, the Enterprise does have a right to refuse to print letters, and I have done that. If they contain too many errors of fact, that happened a lot during the pandemic. If they are slanderous or vulgar personal attacks, we don't publish those. And we've refused to publish misleading statements that can cause harm. For example, someone making providing political or medical information, and they're not a medical person. They don't have the expertise. And I can share that during the pandemic, for example, which was probably one of the more challenging times, that I would reach out to our local medical experts, and they would say, please don't publish that. Please don't publish that, because it was so inaccurate. And I can't do that. I don't want to spread misinformation. I've also recently, confusion about where to find accurate information. As a journalist, of course, I was trained to double and triple check information, seek out knowledgeable experts, verify. My name is attached to the articles that I write, so my integrity is on the line, and I take that very seriously. But everyone needs to learn how to routinely, critically evaluate information and check the credibility of sources. I recently talked to two very intelligent female friends of mine who felt absolutely confounded by all the information out there. And they're highly educated, they hold professional jobs. And I was shocked. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, of course there's reliable information out there. But they were like, yeah, but for every one statement, you might see 20 others that say the opposite. So there is a need for all of us to learn this, media literacy. Everyone needs it. Oh, yes, and the low information citizen. Well, nowadays, unfortunately, we have Americans who derive their news from social media, largely, which of course is a breeding ground for misinformation, conspiracy theories, debunked claims that just get repeated over and over and over again. I've noticed on the Enterprise's social media platform that it's often non-subscribers who just read the headline and then they comment on it, even though they didn't even read the article in full. If they had, they wouldn't be saying what they're saying. And of course, civil discourse is absolutely non-existent on Facebook. I hate Facebook. I'll be honest, I was feeling some hopelessness as a journalist not too long ago with the specialization in media or outlets, channels. Like you could watch golf all day if you wanted to. There are 500 channels to watch, and that's all you could ever watch, and fall down some rabbit hole for whatever hobby you happen to like. And but that means again, everybody's flummoxed about where to find accurate information. In March, I attended a webinar called Make Facts Matter Again by Stephen Lewandowski, and he's a cognitive scientist at the University of Bristol and one of the lead original authors of the Debunking Handbook. And I was very encouraged after watching that there are tools to prevent the spread of misinformation and to debunk misinformation. And the research that they're finding and the tools that they provide, they're working, and they've studied this worldwide. So that was very encouraging to me and should be encouraging to everybody who cares. The enterprise remains committed to the existence of facts. I would like to see media literacy begin in our elementary, middle, and high schools. And the News Literacy Project and newspapers in education programs have resources, but our enterprise staff, I mean, we're small. There's 4 of us, 3 doing news, 1 doing sports. We really don't have the time to go into the classrooms and be sharing some of this information. So if I'd be looking for volunteers if there are people who would be willing to help with this once a month or whatever it happens to be. We could use some help in teaching our young people how to become, media literate, critical thinking, recognizing logical fallacies, all that sort of thing, and staying informed and reading the paper. And in terms of trying to attract some of these younger folks too, we're not so much, print journalists anymore. We are also photographers and videographers, and so we really refer to ourselves as multimedia reporters now because we are covering all those platforms. But I would just like to say I'm grateful to the League of Women Voters of the Park Rapids area for hosting events like this and for guest speakers like today. And thank you everyone for your efforts to debunk misinformation.
Okay, let's see how we're going to do this. I only set up the 2 microphones, so if you have some questions or comment or something like that, if it's a short question, I'll just repeat it. And if it's a longer one, I may see how far the microphone stretches over there, and you may have to come up a little bit farther. So we'll open that up to the rest of you.
I just more or less have a comment on something that you just said about working with students. Our daughter is a librarian, and one of the problems that I saw, I was also in teaching, is they took librarians out of schools, and librarians were often the ones who were okay, let's help you find the research, let's help you find the facts, and just advocating more for let's get true librarians back in school libraries so that our children can be critical thinkers.
Yes.
And that's a big deficit.
I'm just going to summarize that a little bit. The idea that librarians are one of the programs that have been cut back in schools, and that's who we're teaching the literacy skills, and we need to support increases in that librarian. Okay.
It actually helps me build support for the question I was going to ask, and that is that for me, the news media, one of the most important functions it serves is to hold government accountable. And when the government does something like cut libraries, I would like to see a headline. And not just report the facts that they cut the library. So how do you, do you do 2 stories? One, report that they cut, and then over in the editorial page, you talk about the consequences of that? How do you keep 2 voices out of the same person?
Well, I have to be honest, I haven't written a lot of editorials because there was a period of time there were only 2 reporters, and actually I was by myself for about 3 months. I was it. That was it, me. I didn't have time to write any opinion pieces, and even now we don't really have a lot of time to do that. I would hope and encourage letter writers and people to submit letters. But I would say, if a school is cutting the librarian, that we would be writing about that and hoping there would be people talking about that at the school board meeting, So that it's a communal effort, not just up to me as a journalist to be the voice. Does that make sense?
I can add to that from a national scope, not necessarily with librarians, but most recently in ag reporting and doing national ag reporting primarily with policy and a lot of, again, international trade. I worked very closely with a lot of politicians, and first off, somehow I still don't drink, and I really think I should, but part of what I would do if there was an ag policy that was really going to affect farmers, I would report on the policy change or whatever was happening, but then I go out and seek experts who explain how this is going to affect things. So in a situation like that, and I'm sure that this is
Yes.
something she would do, but you don't really think of it when
Yeah.
you're answering the question.
What
But-
she said.
Yeah. But
No, that's true.
you report on it, but then you go and get the experts who say, okay, look, taking librarians out of school, this is the effect it's going to have. So it's kind of different because we're still not saying this is a bad idea, but we are allowing then experts to say, this is a bad idea. So, and that gives it more weight even because, again, we're journalists. You know, we're not necessarily the experts on librarians in school, and I'm not an expert on, I'm kind of not an expert on agricultural policy, but it gives me the opportunity to present experts who are, so that they can say, look, this is the result this is going to have.
May I respond?
Absolutely.
What I see happen, for especially the broadcast media, is instead of going and talking to an expert, they go talk to the person on the street who has absolutely no idea.
Yes, yeah,
But they want someone to be angry,
right.
you know, but they don't know why. So that's the thing that frustrates me, is that instead of going to the expert, you know, they'll go to get the sensational person on the street. So I'm irritated about that.
That is an excellent point, and I absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
You might want to repeat that a bit for the back of the room.
He said that something that frustrates him is in a situation like that, instead of going to an expert to get an expert opinion, and I see it a lot in TV stations, they'll go and talk to a man on the street and get their opinion. Not an expert opinion, just kind of going to get some outrage, because outrage sells. He didn't say that, that's my comment. But I think he's right, and I don't personally like that kind of reporting. In some situations, it's very useful to see what your neighbors are saying about the situation. However, it needs to be balanced with that
Yes.
expert.
And actually, now I can think of recent examples in the enterprise with the federal budget and the proposed cuts. So we had the director of Mojave talk about what that means for Head Start and SNAP and different the energy assistance program. So she wrote about it, you know, yeah, there are other similar examples too.
I just have a question. It's probably more for Shannon, because I'm not sure where some of your background. I know that the Park Rapids Enterprise is a Fargo Forum subsidiary, and I was really appreciative of the map that you put up. It was very, you know, it showed a wide area with a lot of different viewpoints. Do you find that you, as the editor of this newspaper that has agriculture, tourism, and a few other things going on, but I mean, those things going on, but when the forum says, nope, the forum says you will not talk about this thing, or you will not do this, and it's something that you, as the local editor, you know, does that still occur?
A lot of people ask me if the forum has a lot of influence over our editorial decisions. A number of people have asked. And the only situation where that has occurred is with political endorsements. That usually comes from the top, and then we publish them. So whoever they decide, then that's what gets published. But other than that, they might try a one-size-fits-all sometimes. That just doesn't work for Park Rapids, Minnesota, whether it's some initiative or whatever, a series of articles we're all supposed to chime in on. But in terms of editorial decisions, it's really, I haven't had anybody tell me I couldn't publish something.
They used to.
Did they?
Very, very heavy-handed
Okay, what's changed?
before you.
Okay, I believe it, but unfortunately for me, it's not been the case.
Thank you for answering that question, because it's been a while, and I'd just like to see, just because you knew something at one point, things change.
Right.
And I just wanted your perspective on how much liberty your own personal discretion as this newspaper editor
Yes, yes.
was out there.
Just those political endorsements every election year, yeah.
Do you think,
I just want to,
you can come this far, so you come up here.
Shannon, you were with the enterprise before Forum bought it, weren't you?
I don't think
No,
so.
no,
He's always,
no.
yeah.
I wasn't sure. I see you at all the meetings around town that I attend, and, you know, I know your job is massive. And I was a newspaper editor for 10 years in Northern California, and that was way back when, but, oh, okay. I wanted to know if you have advertisers, and I know how important your advertising base is as far as the cost of printing and paying salaries and whatnot, but you have full-page, full-color advertisements on certain issues have in the past. And have you ever had anyone specifically tell you from Fargo, Shannon, we've got, I could pull one out of my hat, I guess, Enbridge is advertising, full back page, full page advertisements, full color. It's more than paying for the cost of publications, but they've never, my question is, have they ever, anybody from Fargo said to you, Shannon, tread carefully if you're going to interview people regarding, in this case, it was a pipeline coming through. Have you ever had that kind of pressure put upon you?
I haven't in my experience here in the enterprise. And apparently things have changed. But no, I have certainly, in my 2 decades at the paper, I've seen businesses be mad at us and quit advertising because they didn't like what we published in the paper. And we try very hard, because of course there's always somebody wanting to get free publicity, right? And so we try very hard to go, well, you know, is that advertising or is that news? And, you know, kind of adhere to that line. But fortunately, I haven't had someone say, oh, this is a big advertiser, don't write about this or that. Yeah.
I find that a little bit surprising, because I often read letters to the editor,
Yeah.
and it seems like they're cherry-picked to, you know, support one viewpoint or another.
I do not, whatever letters we get, I publish them unless they are
Well, you
outside of our
can't
community
publish all of
standards.
them, right? You have
There aren't
to-
many people writing letters to the editor
Oh,
anymore,
okay.
yeah, to be
I guess
honest.
you're busy.
Right?
Yeah.
Letters.
Yeah, people are opting to comment on Facebook probably and not write letters. So, and some, I know some people have complained, well, there aren't enough letters on my viewpoint. Well, write one. I mean, I'm not stopping anybody.
She was waiting right back there.
Oh, okay, well, you wanna come?
Oh, okay.
Have to hold it really close.
this is just a brief follow-on comment. I worry about relying on the way experts are used in newspaper articles, because I think it's become really popular, common at least, for people to shop their experts. You know, industry brings its experts, then this happens in court all the time. you know, the environment brings its experts. How do we trust that a journalist is not shopping experts based on company policy, or if the Forum doesn't have policy, some newspapers do seem to, or at least news outlets like networks do?
That's a great question. That's okay. No, it's fine. It's a great question. And one of the things that I would do as a radio reporter most recently, well, through my entire career, but I'll use a recent example in ag again, is to use more than one expert. Because you can slant a story by finding somebody to quote in it who follows your viewpoint. And those of us who are trying to not slant our stories know that, and so we try to seek people with different expertise or different viewpoints so that we can get a couple of different viewpoints in there. Any one story, let's say there's two sides to every story, but there's a multitude of sides to every story. So the idea with the experts is, if you see a pattern with your whatever news you're reading, if you see a pattern where they're using experts who always slant one direction, then you know you're not going to get an unbiased report from them. In a story that is complicated, that requires a lot of experts, again, dealing with politics, or policy, I should say, how policy affects people, I try to find people who can show me a couple of different sides. So I'll have 2 or 3, and every story should have, I say every story, not every story, but stories like this that are in-depth or have difficult subjects should have more than one source in there. Because you're absolutely right, you're not going to get all sides of an issue from one expert. It needs to be balanced and have a couple of experts in each article or each story.
Well, and I guess I would just pipe in, locally, we're talking to the local doctors or the local conservation officer or these are locals, because we're hyper local.
Yeah.
So if you don't trust your locals, I don't know what to tell you. National and state is different, where you have a wider range of people to pick from, but we're focusing on our locals.
Right, and they would have more local knowledge than anybody too. So even though you are getting one viewpoint, you're getting a viewpoint that really understands the situation. But again, I think a lot of it has to do with patterns. If you're noticing a pattern, again, I wouldn't say so much like with your local newspaper, but if you're watching TV news, again, especially the cable guys, and you're seeing a pattern where they always have experts who have this viewpoint, they're not seeking out another viewpoint and not giving you the full story. So I watch the pattern of it, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's a valid question. It's a very good question. I couldn't see her, so I had to.
Oops. Hi, I've actually got 2 questions. Is this on?
Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit closer.
Okay, so Sabrina, you were talking about how to tell when a video is doctored. What are your rules on that?
That is such a hard question. That is such a hard question because I'm not good at telling yet if videos are doctored. Photos are a little bit easier. Again, if it's a person, you can count the fingers. For some reason, AI still has a problem with fingers.
It's true.
Right? I don't know. What I have started doing is looking for other instances of that video. So if I see a video of a man rescuing a kid from a fire, I will Google, Pittsburgh fire, man rescues child, and see if there's more video. If it's only in that one place and it's a questionable source, then I pretty much will just disregard it. It is really hard to tell, and I don't have good ways to tell you to not trust certain videos because it's improving all the time. I always look to see if I can find it in another source or see a video from same event, different angle, that kind of thing, because that's the only way that I can tell. Some of them obviously we can tell, like when we've got the man that's all bulked up and we know he's not, and okay, that's a doctored video, or cats singing or whatever. Those are AI videos, sure, but some of them are getting so realistic, it is really hard to tell. And I personally hate this spot that we're in where we can't trust our own eyes. We're seeing this, it honestly has fooled me more than once. And Again, it's my 20-something-year-old daughter who says, "Mom, that is not real." Like, okay. But I'll do a Google search, I'll look for the video from a different source. Usually, there's, more than one person, especially with cell phones now. If there's some big event and, a building collapsing or whatever, more than one person's gonna have it, and more than one person's gonna post it. And it'll be from slightly different angles. So if it's something really extreme like that, I'll look for video from a different source and see if it matches up. But it is hard, it's hard. We basically have to question everything we see. And
I was just going to add, you mentioned the Pointer Institute, and they have a newsletter. Anybody can sign up for it. It's called PolitiFact, and they often go over, these are the rumors, this is why it's false. So PolitiFact, wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody can sign up. And then we both mentioned the News Literacy Project. Well, you can go there, and they have something called Rumor Guard. And that's for everybody. You can sign up, so especially if they see something's gone viral and it's completely fake, they send out a newsletter. So I got the one about the car on fire during the LA protests, and they said fake, so everybody can sign up for that. It's newslit.org is the website for News Literacy Project, and then Rumor Guard is the name of the newsletter that you can sign up for.
What was that politics one?
PolitiFact, and that's through the Pointer Institute. I could look that up for you and get that to you too.
it's really, actually, if you have this, you can find PolitiFact through the FERS link on there, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
You have to surf around a little bit, but it's on that website. Yeah, I love PolitiFact.
I do too.
It might end up in the news stories, right?
Yes, thank you for reminding me, yes.
What was your other question?
Okay, so my second question was the Star Tribune published the results of a poll done by the School of Journalism out of the University of Minnesota, of which I'm a graduate. Okay. And first of all, the numbers didn't add up, which means I probably need to go back to the reporter, I would guess, to try to find out. But the majority of outstate people polled were very happy that the president sent in the National Guard and the Marines into LA based on the news they had been seeing. And, that's just a great example of fake news giving us all an opinion.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent example.
Yeah, and I don't trust polls anymore.
I might draw enough, but I guess the one thing that you brought up was elections, and to this day, I can't figure out, they spend billions of dollars on an election, especially a presidential election, and only half of it's real. Are believable, or they do fact checking and everything else. How can money just buy? That's what it's doing, buying their opinion, and it's not real. It's all fake, or it's not true.
I could jump in real quick. So that Make Facts Matter Again, that Bristol University cognitive scientist, he talked about how misinformation is kind of sticky, and this is in your brain. It's a human brain problem. So if you hear something multiple times, it sticks, even though you might even know initially that can't be right, because you've heard it so many times, it sticks. And so that's why we try to prevent the stick, right? But if it gets stuck in there, there are a variety of tools that you can use to show them why that misinformation is inaccurate. But yeah, when you're going up against all that campaign dollar money, it's pretty tough. So
Yeah. I do a whole nother presentation. Is this on?
Yeah, probably not.
doesn't sound like it. Looked up. There you go. Scroll up there.
I do a whole nother presentation on misinformation and fascism. So maybe I'll come back sometime and we can talk about that. But you make another excellent point where there is a lot of misinformation spread by various sources, and I'm not even going to say it's one party or the other. It's various, and each with their own agenda, and it can be very difficult to separate fact from fiction in that. And again, it's another one of those things where I hate the position that we're in as news consumers, where we have to be the ones investigating every fact to make sure it's accurate. But unfortunately, that is the place that we're in, and we're only going to get out of that place by being those people now. So the more that we do now to become more media literate, and the more that we're researching the information that's being presented to us, the better way that we're going to direct our country, just in general. But it is something to be very aware of, and the fact that you're aware of it is good. You can see what's happening. You know, it seems that you're, I want to use the word disgusted by it. That's my impression, just my impression. But it's good that we're aware of it, because we can watch out for that. And I have that problem with the sticky misinformation. There's even information now that I see sometimes, and it's starting to become almost real in my brain. And when I think it, I stop myself and say, no, why am I falling for that? Because I know better. But you hear it so many times over and over and over, and especially those of us in the news, where it's my job every day to hear these things over and over and over, I have to stop myself and say, no, that was not accurate. Here's what's accurate. And a lot of it is in my own mind, reminding myself of what the truth is. Again, I hate that we're at that point, but we're there, and we need to accept it, I guess.
Well, I'll just add, the good news is, okay, so the debunking handbook, it was by this author. Anybody can download it, and it has some great tips in there, because the inoculation to misinformation is repeating facts, repeating the facts. So anyway, this I thought had really great tools and tips.
And I would say too, just to finish up on that real quickly, then we'll come to you, but when you see things like that you know are incorrect, speak up. And that can lead to all kinds of disasters on the internet, and I know this. However, I think sometimes it's really our responsibility to type in that comment and say, look, I know what you're going for here, but this is incorrect. Let's stick to the facts and let everybody make up their mind on the facts. And just start calling out that misinformation, because that's one of the ways that we can combat it.
Well, and this is, you know, you both have addressed the issue, and the thing is, it takes so darn much time. Well, you know that, yep. And everybody here knows that. I mean, you can spend hours checking your facts.
Yes.
Because it's like you say, well, you should just, you know, all of us, when we know that there's something that's wrong, we should say that. Well, the thing is, we have to go check and make sure that we really know that, and it takes forever. And I'm sure that a lot of you have done that.
Yeah.
I've lost days doing that, I swear. But it's just, it becomes an overwhelming thing that most people don't have the time to deal with. And you just kind of go, oh, I think I'll just do D today on everything. But I think that's one of the things that's very difficult. You've addressed it, the league addresses it, but it's just like, we've got to figure out what's true, what's this little thing, what's this, what's that, and then how do we come up with more time or ways to
Is there a word for that?
I-
What do you word for that?
News fatigue.
Yeah,
News fatigue.
Yes.
Yeah. I would really recommend going to PolitiFact or Rumor Guard because I think they have it organized by topic, as I recall. So whatever the topic is, you click on the topic and it'll say, this is the myth that's maybe trending and here's the answer.
And I would add to that too, and that's a great suggestion. But also something that I've had to do in my own personal life is choose my causes. All misinformation really upsets me, and because I'm kind of a black and white person, it's either true or it's not. So all of it really upsets me. But what I've had to do, especially in the last few years, is choose my causes, because I wanted to fight for every cause. I wanted to get into it every time I see something that's wrong. What I had to do for my own sanity, and for the sanity of my poor husband who lives with me, is decide, okay, these are the causes that are most important to me. These are what I know the most about. This is what I'm most comfortable speaking on. These are what I'm going to stick to. When I see something else that's wrong, I might post in there, hey, that's wrong, but I'm not going to, I just physically can't spend the hours researching everything. But I am really good on the First Amendment. I am really good on agricultural policy, obviously, and I'm really good on political issues like fascism and authoritarianism and elections and things like that. So those are the things that I stick to. When I see something that's not in one of those 3 lanes, again, it upsets me. Sometimes I will forward it on to somebody else who I know that's their lane, and I'll say, hey, I have a good friend, Brian, he and I text all the time. He sends me stuff that's in my lane, I send him stuff that's in his lane. I say, hey, Brian, this is all you go for it. And he does. So we have a nice little team going. But it's impossible for us to fight on all fronts. We have to kind of choose the ones that are our specialties. You know, this is my specialty argument. Somebody wants to fight with me about the First Amendment, bring it on. But I'm gonna leave, you know, the animal rights or whatever else alone, because I can't. Yeah, because you get exhausted.
Okay. This is a wonderful bunch of questions and stuff, and I think we've gone over time a little bit, and I can't quite see the clock from here. No, nobody's coming, but the janitor probably wants to get in here. So I'm gonna thank our panel, Sabrina, Shannon. This was terrific. Thank all of you for coming. Your questions are wonderful. As we're cleaning up, if you have some more questions or another comment that you'd like to talk to the ladies, I'm sure that would be helpful. If anybody